Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon. It's Shirley with Spirit of Matter. And I know this is Saturn hour when I'm recording, but because I talk about Saturn T, I'm going to call on Deneb Algadi, Spica, and Procyon. The midheaven is right on Mars. Um, so let's call for the benefic support of Deneb Algadi, benefic support of Beta Per Se for the topic of discussion. And yesterday episode, I halted basically when I said, listen to Jago, right? What is done in black music, trading in currency, it's not the currency that we are trading. It's not because they're black. This is just the way it operates. So that immediately points me to the notion that when you hear people say to you the limitation on cash is not actually stopping organized crime or money laundering, that's what they mean. Okay, that's what they mean. There's no need to money launder when all the resources are already accessible with the currencies that we don't use, that are used on the ground. Okay, I wouldn't suggest you to become part of that currency, and nor does it save you from reincarnation to do like those things. But the thing is that all that you're going to hear about currency and all the limitation of like that stops crime, the reason that does not actually stops crime or money laundering is very simply put, because they don't need that type of wealth. Okay, United States can be in tremendous debt and not need that type of wealth because there are other currencies. This is what we are dealing with on a currency level, knowing that is power. Because no one has any argument about you. I was watching just right now an episode about Nina Simone, and it was showing the black protests and police kind of like waiting it off. And somebody was saying this is an illegal okay thing. And I think Donald Trump has been excellent in exposing the satire of illegality. He exposed the fact that the US president can actually decide to assassinate his competitor, and that this is the law. Okay, so when you hear him talking about Native Americans as, or Native is the wrong, Indigenous Americans, Native is native to the land. All Everybody who was born in America is Native American. But the thing is that he says that those are illegal immigrants. This is yet another satirical notion that has been used in the U.S. law. And then the question is how do we, the people, respond to that? Trump is excellent in these satires. He's excellent in pointing out the structure as it is. And then, it's like if you let him capitalize on that, he will. If you change that, he'll adapt. He's mercurial. So that kind of something I wake up with. I have been waiting for my Sphere and Sundry oil, and the amounts of attacks. The amounts of attacks is just what the fuck, okay? And and of course, that backfires. The more they try, the more they die. But this is something that's just so significant. Okay, that the woman makes a Tima Mundi talisman, and and the world goes literally crazy, because yeah, it is good magic, where all that infiltrates with creating something is actually benefic for ourselves and for humanity is naturally falling. It just makes the fall easier, not harder, because instead of having like an entire Holocaust and thinking that you're gonna be saved in a bunker in Albania and then dying, you get the chance to transform and to go into the golden ages. So I'm in my 40s, so I'm gold. That's very relevant, right? My golden ages, right? But that thing is, especially and particularly from people who have targeted me in the past. And that work was done around like 2018, 2019 to 2020, 21. And like all that I've been through backfires. That's the point. And every time I order, that backfires deeper and deeper. Um, so I get more and more information to share with you. Okay, for why was I targeted this way? I talked about sex espionage when I talked about the Trump, Musk, and the like. This is such a blue ocean. They can do it. This is such a blue ocean for them to do that. If they get to do that on Mars, so like not to have sex espionage, like it seems counterintuitive that they do that. But if they do that, that is really reversing all malefic things that happen to them even since childhood or birth. So, and on a humanity level, and that's just so compatible with expanding to other galaxies and stuff. And now I wake up with the currency stuff. So of course, if the trading never was okay, let's talk about Peter de Vries. And Peter R. de Vries was a very big name in Netherlands, and for various reasons. Of course, he was also everything that you say about the cults and elites. He had to be, okay. Like even his greatest opposition would tell you he had to be. There was no way to do what he did, and to in no way there was no way to do that. And the thing is that I'm talking about the fingerprint or the digital or the mark for his show was basically the omens that I received when I first channeled him was you could see his face with the fingerprint, and I would get the fingerprint and I wouldn't understand anything because I did not grow up in Netherlands. So that was something I talked about. But you would see how that fingerprint is used to enslave people and may or may not have been a part of his thing. His son wrote a book with him that was Peter promising him that he will live to 100 years old. And that is very, and I'm definitely going to read the book. And that is for a person who solved cold cases, who was entire life in life risk. That sounds like a promise, okay, that you promise to your child. From a cult perspective, this is giving Kissinger, okay, this is giving a centurion and person that would be allowed to live to 100 in a memento mori cult, and what he would have to do for that. Eventually, Peter spoke against the WHO, and that was it, okay? You're gonna hear a lot of things. You're gonna hear the Lanu, you're gonna hear Tachi, you're gonna hear this, you're gonna hear that. Peter spoke against the WHO and ended like everybody that spoke against the WHO because he was not racist towards like the Moroccans. Then there was an attempt to kind of like make a Moroccan betray him or ruin his legacy or whatever he did. Did he not also have to torture people or something like that? Very likely he did. Like that's a part of the training. But he also tended to things that literally no one did, and he did betray the WHO. Okay, that's the more important thing because he worked with Supreme Court Joris Demming, and according to Hans Amendment, that would be a mole X of that global intelligence, and that was indeed when Hans Amendment got, I think, more a credit from the UN. On 15 July is when Peter was announced dead, while he was shot 9 days before in 5 bullets in July 6, 2021. And yes, and the reason I mentioned that, one of the things that he did, he looked into a lawyer's office and he was with hidden camera. And he see that the lawyer receives payment, and the payment is 50 euros. I think it was 50 euros, or yes, still euros back then, and a 50 gram of white of cocaine. And just this understanding that this is currency is highly important to understand. First of all, if you're a lawyer in Netherlands or in general, you're gonna need those 50 grams. Like you're gonna be using them. Okay, it's not even about the lawyer being able to pull that drugs, a lot of them do. Um, okay. But it's not just being able to trade in that. And I would say even much more as that. If you are a lawyer in Netherlands, you have to trade that. That's the currency. If you want to be a part, if there was, okay, I'm not going to put that office again on the spot, but yes, I am, because one of the things that were against the office of the Friesen Kassem, when the Friesen Kassem, was that Khalid Kassem was partner of Peter de Vries and partner of his son in the lawyer, in the advocaat kantoor, lawyer's office. It's like, yes. That guy was accused of bribing some official in favor of a client. Okay, and you have to understand, it sounds very terrible, but if you, let's say, need a defense from a lawyer and you know that your judge is supposed to rape children on tape, then you're gonna need, you're gonna need to sway a little bit. The scales of justice need a little bit of pull. Okay, and if a 50 grams of white to do that pull, you're gonna have to have these 50 grams of white. So Saturn's gonna go over the Fries Peters, meet heaven and then Mars, and if ever there were 50 grams of white, that would probably be out. But you cannot without understanding the structure, that's the currency. So when somebody tells you that the reason you need a fingerprint to get to your account, or you need a digital ID, or you need a digital currency to avoid money laundering and so on and so forth, okay, that's bogus. It's never been the currency of trade, and 50 grams of white is good. Okay, this is relative to the levels of corruption. And mind you, when I first channeled Peter, he told me first thing, he said, this country is North Korea. And I didn't believe it's true until I saw Wilders, his opposition, saying, I'm not North Korea like they think I am. And I'm like, oh my God, that was Peter. Whether it was actually Peter or it was by proxy, but this was correct information. The second thing he said I was not even aware of the level, of how deep the corruption goes. Okay, and I don't know more of what that means. But the thing is that this is the person that you would, the go-to person as to how corrupt things are. And so to get to that level of tending to things, to get to the level of speaking against the WHO, you need to be vouched for. Who can vouch for your side, WHO? Only mafia. But the mafia is working with, okay? So not to go like Baby Zin, okay? So not to go into jail for offenses against children or women, because this is where their fate is very, very bad. And so, and that's the reason I mentioned that, because it's not for tarnishing the name, but actually for you to get, because it's going to look very corrupt, but you don't even understand the depth of the corruption. And so if a person, let's say, doesn't want to do organ trade to tip the scales in favor of, I don't know, somebody who needs a house because they want to get out of, I don't know, crime or something like that, and it's usually the case, okay, they turn to these lawyers to represent them, not against the state, and definitely not against individuals who can't really do anything, but they kind of against each other, okay, not to escalate the violence. And there's a reason why the Supreme Court in Netherlands, the saying in Latin is saying, okay, when the judiciary decision fails, a war or weapon pursues, okay, a bloody fight pursues. And that was the point, okay, to try to make it as least bloody as it can be, even within those sectors. So that's kind of important to understand. What and the training for anybody who wants to be a lawyer is academic, which means you have to be part of secret societies to go through the tests for certification. Okay, they make it very, very challenging, and I think Christopher Warnock mentioned that when he mentioned about the standardization of astrology. He said he's a lawyer and he's a civil litigator, right? Yes. And he said that he doesn't see the level of corruption in his profession decreases with the certification process. Okay, and I have to back it up, because the more there is certification around something, the more you need to be entangled with the secret societies and with the intelligence, and the more snuff films need to be filmed. Okay, so and that is something that concerns me, both for young lawyers and for anybody who wants to do something in favor of themselves and humanity. When I was 12 years old, I knew very well that I'm afraid to go into criminal justice. Back then, my fear was that the organized crime would turn against me. But now I have a bit of a deeper understanding, because people don't get to be organized crime unless they are very, very excluded from society. And it was in many cases those organizations that were more favoring of women's rights than other parts of society. However, they still have there's a lot of a road to go. Okay, there's a lot of road to go, and I talked about it when I talk about abolishing infanticide, abolishing child weddings, and the willing consent inside the marriage, and not to see woman as whore, because basically 9 times out of 10 she's been raped. Okay, so like this is your chance to reinclude her into society, and also avoid infiltration of intelligence and to make chaos in your dealings. So that's relevant to any person. Um, and I see that this level of corruptions that need to be to be someone that entertains the law, so that when people say this demonstration is not lawful, there will be someone with authority to say, well, that's actually fucking wrong, and that need to be accessible to us, to understand the basis of law, to understand maritime law, to be able to say yes, no, and maybe to understand that I do not consent, that no one has right to make you consent. And even when I talk about credit fraud, when I witnessed it, when I worked in a credit card company, if I tell you at the end of the conversation, well, I just set your monthly return to $400, and I just move on with the conversation, and you think it like it's a side note, you don't even hear me saying that, and you signed that, and then you pay the interest, okay, that is credit fraud. You did not get the chance to understand what you're signing, to say yes, no, and maybe, and that is already credit fraud. So that's something that's important for you to understand, because I understood that being being a person that said, I'm not going to do that, I'm not going to cooperate with that, and it's not me worried for my own ass. I really, if I thought that this is like a small thing, like me stealing food because I don't have food, I say fuck it, okay? But because I believe that this is wrong course of action, wrong course of action for economy, and eventually also for the company. We lose clients, and we get our clients very, very angry at us for a very good reason when we do that, and then the entire service department has to deal with the backlash of it, because they're going to call the customer service, and the customer service, they have to sell, they have the same rates that I have for sales, but minus the wage, and that is okay, that is something that is harming on all levels, and eventually ends up in a class lawsuit that costs a lot of money for the company. The people don't get so compensated, but it costs a lot for the company. And class lawsuits is, by the way, the least effective way to do things. It's the laziest. Okay, it's good to unionize, but it doesn't get you what it's supposed to get you. And an entire procedure of law is kind of being inaccessible. So that is yes, sometimes you gotta go like Peter. I knew the laws, but the laws did not know me. And but to back it up, you need to be vouched for, and to speak against WHO, he needed to be vouched for. And very simply put, okay, the fact that I know about the baby sin, and the fact that I know about, Tahir representing himself, not having a single lawyer's office that does not represent sex offenders, and there's nothing wrong with representing sex offenders, but it cannot be that you cannot find a single office that doesn't do that, and there can be conflict of interest when your office does both that and representation of victims of sex offense, which is a unique type of offense. When I talked about the creation of sex espionages, I mentioned exactly why. Um, it's the usual procedure of the court is not compatible with sexual offenses. Um, and that is, if you know, something that we all know. Anybody who's ever recovered from even the slightest of thing um, knows that you need to speak in order to heal and so on. And you need to not speak by force. So there's a threshold force and there's an explosive speech. And it has to be public because outer planets to inner planets. Um, so that's just the way things go. So when we talk about like level of corruption, yeah, we need to understand that. We need to understand what it does and what it does to everyone involved, and how it makes them difficult for those who call elite to get out of the cults. Ronald Bernard is talking about this. He was born outside the cult, went through intense abuse, and then joined the cult because he wanted to make money for his family. Um, until after suicide attempt, he left the cult after torture, and still cannot say names of people for fear for his life. So no contract, no he has no obligation to keep any word to dark forces. That's important because it has no validity. That being said, of course, on a practical level, protecting his life is having the initiation of Beats of Joy, which is a new currency that's setting itself to be free of satanic ritual abuse. And it also has to do with repairing of houses. So that is something to perhaps check out. You can check Ronald Bernard on YouTube. Um, but just so you know, the enslavement currencies that we are offered are not having anything to do with money laundering, with any of that. That's simply not needed. Okay, that's simply not needed. They don't trade the way we trade. They don't trade what we trade, and there is just no connection between this economy and that economy. Okay, so it's not bad to follow the money. It's not bad to know that Bank of America owns BlackRock, and then it's owned by the Vatican. Um, but there are also hidden forces that can change the face of how we see economy as well, because it's different currencies. Okay, um, and that's something we need to be tending to. The best way to tend to that is to raise the value of will and consent, and rehabilitation of sexual energy, abolish creation of sexpionage, of torturing children, and so on and so forth. Listen to satanic ritual abuse survivors, okay? Because that's the energy that would get you somewhere. That's the energy of true wealth. Um, and that's the energy that whatever those forces try to do is going to backfire. But it's also the energy of being inclusive. If you hold for the slavery values of like Arbeit macht frei, if you hold for these slavery values and you hold for blaming the victim, and you hold for not allowing a genuine chance for rehabilitation for people in a way that respects the sovereignty and dignity of all concerned, then you are creating organized crime. Okay, that's simply put. Okay, either your structure is inclusive, not erasing the sovereignty of anyone, including what we call in law the principle of the weak skull. And the principle of the weak skull, when I talk to you about credit fraud, and I say to you, if I tell you, well, I set in your monthly return for $400 and you spend 4,000, and I just go on with the conversation, this is the principle of the weak skull in effect, because the weak skull simply means that some people are more susceptible to those type of frauds than others. And that's reason enough to say that there was fraud in here. So we have to be inclusive of that weak skull, so to speak, because because that weak skull becomes the recruited agent and the espionage and the sexpionage, and that's malefic for both them and we the people. So thank you for listening.